what's going on? I am Greg Sussman, joined today by JJ Zacharyson of FanDuel, who's here to help us learn who to buy and sell as we head into week number 12. What's going on, JJ?
Not too much, man. It's kind of hard to believe that we're already into week 12. It's almost the fantasy football playoffs, but I'm ready to go.
Absolutely. For many people, this is their last chance to buy and sell as they prepare for those fantasy playoffs. So let's start at the top. And by the top, I mean the top of the fantasy drafts. That's where Saquon Barkley went. He was the number one overall pick, consensus-wise, throughout fantasy football. And this week, you're telling fantasy owners to buy Saquon Barkley. But as producer Alex questioned, who's selling Saquon Barkley? How can we do it?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously will have to give up a lot in order to buy him, but this is just generally saying that Saquon Barkley's disappointed a little bit this season, especially the last time we saw him. He had 13 carries for 1 yard on the ground, but it sounds like the Giants aren't going to shut him down. That's at least what Pat Shurmur said. Then on top of that, since Saquon Barkley's come back from his ankle injury, he's seen about 97% of the team's running back carries, an 18% target share. The usage is there. And in weeks 15 and 16 in the fantasy football playoffs, he's going to get Miami and Washington. So Saquon Barkley, even though he's kind of disappointed throughout the season, he should come through in the fantasy football playoffs.
You got to be able to rely on Barkley as you head into the fantasy playoffs. And buying him right now, despite it costing a lot, well, we'll give you the opportunity to do so. Barkley should be set for a monster fantasy playoffs. Well, throughout the season, the talk has been about how good the New England defense has been. But that's not the defense you're buying looking toward week 12. You're going all in on the Ravens defense. How come?
I am. If you look at their splits when they got Marcus Peters, they've averaged 17.5 standard fantasy points per game with Peters over their last 4 games. Before that trade went down, they were averaging 4.3 standard fantasy points per game. And then in the fantasy playoffs from weeks 14 through 16, they get teams like the Jets, the Bills, and the Browns. So they have a great schedule setting up for the fantasy playoffs. They're playing better than any other defense in football. I think the Ravens could be league winners.
You never think of a defense as a league winner, but given the schedule that JJ just threw out there, they might be exactly that. Take a look at the Ravens defense if they're out there on the waiver wire, because they shouldn't be. They could be the major impact you need to win your league. Up next, we get to a former New York Giant, and that's Odell Beckham Jr. JJ, we've been waiting for Odell to pop off. It hasn't happened yet. Why are you believing it could happen soon?
Yeah, he was an inch away from finally finding the end zone against Pittsburgh this past week after not scoring for a lot of weeks. But if you look at his peripherals, they're still there. They're still pretty strong. He saw a lot of targets last week against Pittsburgh in a fairly tough matchup. But moving forward, they get teams like Miami, they get Cincinnati, and they get Arizona in 3 of their next 4 games. Those are great opponents for Odell Beckham. He has a 27% target share this season. I think he should be fine down the stretch.
Although we've been saying he should be fine for like the last 12 weeks, it hasn't happened yet. Hopefully down the stretch that changes and OBJ gets going and does get that extra inch, finds the end zone more, and helps fantasy owners toward their league championship. Moving on, we'll get to the players we start to sell, and that brings us to Bills quarterback Josh Allen. He's been a fantasy commodity throughout the season, and for the most part, he stayed healthy. He had a monstrous week last week. You don't think he's someone we should be buying right now. How come?
Yeah, look, with Josh Allen, he's going to give you some sort of a floor each week. He's averaging 33 rushing yards per game this season, which is an extension from what we saw last year. We know that he can get points on the ground. But, about a month ago, a little over a month ago, we were sitting on this show talking about buying the Bills' passing attack because they had a cakewalk schedule, and that included someone like John Brown. But moving forward, you could argue pretty easily that the Bills have the toughest schedule on paper for a quarterback, and then obviously includes Josh Allen. I'm looking at it now. They get Denver, they get Dallas, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and then New England to close out the fantasy football season. All of those teams are playing above expectation when adjusted for strength of opponent in terms of fantasy football points against. So Josh Allen in a really tough spot. I think he can still be usable in some way because of that rushing floor, but the ceiling might not be there.
All right, the ceiling may not be as high as you want it to be toward the fantasy playoffs. That schedule very, very tough. But the floor with Josh Allen makes him pretty sellable, and I think that's what you should use to move on from Josh Allen, improve your quarterback situation, and set yourself up nicely for the next few weeks. Another player that may be worth selling here is Tarik Cohen of the Bears. He had a nice game on Sunday Night Football against the Rams, but David Montgomery, he wasn't 100%. You got to use this opportunity to sell Tarik Cohen, right?
Yeah, I think so. It was basically Tarik Cohen's best game usage-wise since week 1. But like you noted, David Montgomery was banged up. Tarik Cohen now over his last 2 games, he only has 58 receiving yards, but he's scored twice. Over the last 5 years, running backs have averaged a receiving touchdown on every 203 receiving yards. So there's negative regression coming for Tarik Cohen as a receiver. But then on top of that, that's negative regression in a bad offense. So I think Tarik Cohen's a pretty easy sell right now.
Cohen's an easy sell right now, like you said, because he's not going to be able to sustain that touchdown production that he's given you. You just can't rely on him on a week-to-week basis. Even though he's facing the Giants this week, I still don't want him in my starting lineup come playoff time. Potentially the hardest player to sell, it's Mark Ingram. The Ravens running back scored a couple of touchdowns this past week, and he's been good all season long. Faces the Rams this week, and the playoff schedule, we read it to you before with the Ravens. It looks pretty good. Why do you want to sell him?
Yeah, it does look fine. I think Mark Ingram can be an RB2 from here on out, but I'm selling him more as an RB1, which is where he's currently ranked. His peripheral numbers really aren't there. He ranks 38th this season in running back target share. He's 15th in the NFL in rush attempts, which is fine, but it's nothing elite. It's not RB1 type usage. And then on top of that, even though he is in a good offense and players in good offenses typically overperform in the touchdown column, based on his yardage total, he has 4.6 more touchdowns than he should have this year. Even if you were to cut that in half, it's tough to sell Mark Ingram as anything but a negative touchdown regression candidate. So I think all of that combined, yes, he should be an RB2, like I said. But if you can sell him as an RB1, I think that you should do it.
So, JJ, for you, perhaps packaging in Mark Ingram to go get Saquon Barkley is something you'd obviously do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he's a great piece in a 2-for-1 trade to upgrade that running back spot.
Mark Ingram's as solid as they come. A really good RB2 that's putting up RB1 numbers right now. This may be your last chance to trade him away for something even better. So make sure you do it before the playoffs begin. That's going to do it for us here on the FanDuel Hurry Up. JJ, appreciate the time and good luck this week.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thanks, JJ, and I'll be sure to troll you for more Patrick Mahomes takes. Tomorrow, Jim Sonos will join me as we take a look at Week 12 from a DFS perspective. Have a great night, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.